It's a really hot day to be wearing a tinfoil hat, but it keeps the brain waves going, you know. But anyway, point is this new update. Not really an update as much as just, well, I guess it's an update. Anyway, China is buying a crap load of the United States soybeans, which is nothing new, but they're buying more than usual because of the damage to the crops over the summer with the heat wave. It was the worst drought they've seen since 1956, and there were some places where records were, like, there's over 4,500 heat wave records, like, in the United States this summer that were broken, okay? So you got to keep that in mind. This is one of the worst droughts they've seen since 1956 in some areas. And there's some 500-year-old records that were broken. And China's buying these soybeans. The source, when I report this stuff, I get my sources not just from the mainstream media, not just from the alternative media, not from the conspiracy. I get it from them all. And this one, I mean, there's farmers that are just saying, you know, that they're just devastated. Like they're like, okay, well, we have about a couple of weeks, and then they got to file for, you know, destroy the crop. This is the worst part. It's not worth it for them to save any of the crop. This is the part that's scary because they're insured. And I guess the way the insurance works out, I don't know, you'd have to check this out for yourself, but probably in some states where, okay, if you're going to file an insurance claim, you have to destroy all the crops. So any little bit of crop that would help out, wow, that's hot. Well, the problem would be that, you know, none of it's getting to the market. So China's buying this because they figure in the soybeans from the United States, which supplies the world. You know, it's not the only source, but it's a big chunk of it. You know, and because people are so self-reliant nowadays, it's going to hurt. And they figure they're going to have to probably start to ration the soybeans. But the thing like corn, soybeans, stuff like that, rice, everything is made with this stuff. These are the staple foods. You know, so by about mid-February, they figure there might be no soybeans anywhere. You know, just because all these crops that are just, and it's every country, it's not just the United States, but the United States does feed a lot of the world. A lot of people don't realize that. You know, here in Canada, it's like, okay, well, what do you mean? Like, I mean, you know, we have a whole bunch of farms here. Well, we do and we don't. We only have about, since the year 1900 to now, like, I mean, there's only about 3% of the farms left here in Canada. And most of them are producing fuel, corn for ethanol, you know, you know, they're not producing food. Like I've always said, you can't eat more food than you grow. 2 + 2 don't make 5, you know what I'm saying? And this is coming from the farmers themselves. There's one guy who said, like, his crop, like he said, it's most likely he's going to have to write the crop off. But, you know, he says the insurance companies they're going to take a hell of a loss this year. So it all translates. So now you've got another financial burden that's going to be, you know, God knows where that's going to default to, because we know how the insurance companies and bankers work, you know, so we know that, you know, the taxpayer is going to have to pay for it. But you know what? Money isn't the issue here. Food is. It's not even going to be as bad as you can't afford the food. There's just no food. So all I'll say is put the food away now, because the way the reserves work, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Whenever people can't get fed, you have war. That's simple. This update, I think, is probably that kind of threshold where if, you know, I mean, at this point, if you're still wearing rose-colored glasses, you think I'm a conspiracy theorist. At this point, you know, you're just stupid. You know, there's nothing we can do for you. Look into what I say. Never take anything one person says. Look into the bigger picture. You know, like who's saying what, and you know what is, you know, from the mainstream media to the alternative media, what is, you know, accurate. Well, when you hear right from the farmers themselves, you know, they know best. They know that their crops are failing. And this is one of the worst records, you know, in God knows how long. You know, like, there have been droughts and stuff before, but we didn't have the population we had before. You know, like, back in the 1950s or the 1930s or whatever, there was like a 10-year drought in the States, when 1930s, 1940s, I guess. And, yeah, but we didn't have 8 billion people on the planet. Now, the United States does not feed all 8 billion people. And there's some people that, they might not understand what I'm saying, you know, or they take it too literally. What I'm saying is the United States is a huge contributor to everybody else's, like, everybody buys from them, you know, food, you know, because they can produce it, you know. You have a relatively, you know, like, for example, Africa. You think Africa, you know, with that much jungle, and, well, okay, they have a lot of desert too, but there's areas where it's all jungle. You would think they'd be growing food left, right, and center, but they're war-torn in a lot of these areas. So that's, you know, you got the stability of the United States. People start starving in the United States, I mean, it'll help the obesity problem. North America's a little more drought and famine resistant, if you know what I'm saying, in the belly area. So, but that said, people get cranky when they don't eat. I mean, real hunger, law of three, 3 minutes without air, you die. 3 days without water, you die. 3 weeks without food, you die. That's somebody who's healthy. That's just a staple. It doesn't mean, for example, that, you're going to be fined for that whole, 3 weeks without food. You're going to be fine for the whole time, and then you're just going to drop dead. No, after a couple of hours without eating, you're going to be completely, you're going to be grumpy. You're not going to be on you're not easy, simple tasks, like dialing a phone, for example. You're going to get the number wrong. You're going to get mad. Food affects you. You need it, So, and we're talking about law of threes applies to like the average healthy person. Anybody with any sort of problems whatsoever, health-related problems, it's that much worse if they can't get food. So the only thing I could say now is stockpile as much as you can. Think just at least to get through the winter. And then if you got a front yard, there was a couple in Drummondville, Quebec, that won out against the establishment. So they were growing I guess you would say a permaculture urban garden right on their front lawn. And it didn't go with the building codes and stuff like that. But they won. Okay, they were told to destroy the garden, but they didn't. The courts sided with them. And they even lifted the law a little enough to say that, you know what, if anybody else wants to do it, go ahead. I say, take advantage of that. This idea that only the big agro companies can grow food is just ridiculous. And any law that says you can't grow food, I think, is just ridiculous. Do we need regulation? Yes, but we also need free market too. That's what led to this, That's what's leading to these food shortages, is that you're reliant on so few resources. If every one person on the planet grew say, one thing, a tomato plant, a hot pepper plant, a potato plant, whatever, just one, everyone, and we pooled that all together, there'd be so much wasted food because we wouldn't be able to eat it fast enough. Problem is there's so few, like I say, there's only about 3% of farmers left in Canada, considering to, the year 1900. Now, in 1900, we were probably producing more food than we could ever get rid of for the amount of, to population size. That's hot. But the problem we have now is that, again, we have more people and less to feed and less people growing. So now's the time to get self-reliant. Problem is if you're a Canadian, we're in August. There's no use putting in a garden now. You're not going to be able to do that till next June. Why? If your garden isn't in by now, it's by the time it takes 4 months to get a decent crop. And, the average person eats about 2,000 pounds of food per year. So think about that. How much is it going to take to sustain you, let alone your family? So put food away. These warnings, if I'm wrong, nothing happens. If I'm right, what happens? Nothing good. And trust me, if you have food and people know you have food, they're coming for it. Maybe not right now, but like I say, 2 days after people are starving to death, collapse of your country's going to go into chaos. People will be killing each other for food. So the farmers are saying it. I take the word of the farmers very, very seriously. When they're talking about insurance companies and destroying their crops, I think especially, where they're saying it, in one of their best food-producing areas in the United States, they don't have food, so very scary. But China, yeah, they're buying up soybeans because they got a lot of people to feed too. Rice did well in some areas, but rice is up by about 40%. Soybeans are up by about 50%, and corn, I think, is up by about 40%. And we're also seeing, not just the soybean problem, but, the Chinese are not stupid either. They know very well that, if they can't feed their people, they're going to have a major problem. So that's why they're buying it now. But the forecast, and this is from the, markets that follow this, not just the farmers themselves, but the forecasts are that in February we could see a soybean shortage. So there could be rationing of products, meaning you're just not going to see as much on the shelf, and what you do see on the shelf is going to be more expensive. And we're already seeing it. The other thing is that right now might be the prime time to buy, say, like beef and stuff like that, because people are killing off their livestock because they know they're not going to be able to feed them. One guy resorted to feeding his livestock with old candy and stuff like that, from factories, just to keep them. Because even in the United States, yeah, some states could probably produce food all year round, but there's other things to factor in weather-wise that might not produce as much. So, look into it. Please look into it because, food, that's the big one. you could do without money, but you can't do without food. You know what I'm saying? So I guess I'll leave it at that. And as I find out more big things, but this is a big eye opener when like there's nothing new about China buying soybeans. I mean, it's the fact that they're buying so much of it because they know, okay, well if the crops are doing bad there, they got to feed their people too. So when it gets to the point where they have to ration it, it's too late. That's the thing you have to consider. When they get to the point where they have to ration the food, saying, okay, everybody's only going to get so much, it's too late. And by mid-February, if we ran out of soybeans, just look at what's made with soybeans. Look at what's made with corn. Look at what's made with rice. And you'll see what I mean. It's a staple food. Almost everything you eat has it in there. And if you have to ration that, I mean, we're not, especially North America, we're not a society used to being told, no, you have to do without. Convenience is just something you pay for. So when you can't pay for it because it just doesn't exist, well then there's going to be problems. You're not going to, most people are not going to know how to deal with that, and usually they deal with it very violently. If you don't believe me, just look around the world. Syria, that's yeah, there's a lot of other things going on there, but that's what happens when people don't eat. And most of these wars, that's what it is. It's you look at Africa, that's what happens when people don't eat, is they fight each other. So it's not the only root cause, but it is definitely a big. Poverty is a big one, but starvation is a huge one. It'll make you do anything to anyone. Trust me, there was a lot of tests done on this. They took a bunch of Navy soldiers and Army soldiers and stuff like that way back in the 50s or 40s, I can't remember, and they went on a 60-day starvation diet. And basically, they had just enough to eat so that they wouldn't die, but not enough to. They were losing. Each guy probably lost about 60 pounds over the 6-month period. And by the end of the first 30 days, most of them gave up on it. And I think there was something like 60 or 80 guys or 100 guys that were in on it. And the ones that did stay by after the first month, they were thinking of cannibalism big time. It was in their thought. They were thinking of it because the brain just goes primal at that point where it's just like I'll eat anything. A stick. You got to look at it this way. There's a reason why back in the 1800s there wasn't 8 billion people on the planet. People had to be self-reliant. And most people are not now, so yeah. But anyway, I guess I'll leave it at that. Please check up on it. There is a food crisis coming. It's not coming, it's here. I mean, you're already seeing it. First, the prices will go up, and then it doesn't matter because there's no food. That's why the prices are going up. Fuel does have a lot to do with it. Yes, I know that. There's a lot of other things to factor, but that's a big one. When there's nothing to buy, it doesn't matter how much it's worth. You can't buy it, right? So anyway, put food away. Post this to your Facebook. Spread it around. I don't care if people look at me like a whack job, but what I say is don't take my word for it. Look into it. When the mainstream guys are starting to say the same things as the guys with the tinfoil hats, I think you should start to listen because that means they're desperate too. So, and I'm hearing this from all sources, including the farmers. So, anyway, rate, subscribe, definitely post your Facebook, definitely put some food away. Okay, the food crisis update. It's a really hot day to be wearing a tinfoil hat, but it keeps the brain waves going, But anyway, point is this new update, not really an update as much as just, well, I guess it's an update. Anyway, China is buying a crap load of the United States soybeans, which is nothing new, but they're buying more than usual because of the damage to the crops over the summer with the heat wave. It was the worst drought they've seen since 1956, and there were some places where records were, like there's over 4,500 heat wave records, like in the United States this summer, that were broken, okay? So you got to keep that in mind. This is one of the worst droughts they've seen since 1956 in some areas. And there's some 500-year-old records that were broken. And China's buying these soybeans. The source, when I report this stuff, I get my sources not just from the mainstream media, not just from the alternative media, not from the conspiracy. I get it from them all. And this one, I mean, there's farmers that are just saying, that they're just devastated. Like they're like, okay, well, we have about a couple of weeks, and then they got to file for, destroy the crop. This is the worst part. It's not worth it for them to save any of the crop. This is the part that's scary because they're insured. And I guess the way the insurance works out, I don't know, you'd have to check this out for yourself, but probably in some states where, okay, if you're going to file an insurance claim, you have to destroy all the crops. So any little bit of crop that would help out, wow, that's hot. Well, the problem would be that, none of it's getting to the market. So China's buying this because they figure in the soybeans from the United States, which supplies the world, it's not the only source, but it's a big chunk of it, And because people are so self-reliant nowadays, it's going to hurt. And they figure they're going to have to probably start to ration